This is Rudo Radio coming to you from the 559.
Hello and welcome to Rudo Radio, SB Nation in Cage Heights Seats weekly wrestling podcast. I am joined as always by Mr. Mark Normandin. Mark, how are you?
Mr. Ugh.
Normandin.
Ugh.
Got you again. That's two. How are you doing?
Well, now I'm doing shitty.
Did you miss me last week?
It was so busy that it's good last week because of the draft and everything, and we covered it at SB Nation, like a legitimate sports draft. So, I was pumping out like tons of articles and editing things quickly. I kind of like at the end was like, oh man, I'm so glad we didn't try and record like while you were on vacation, didn't try and squeeze it in because there was already so much going on that I was just like, no, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything anymore.
Is that weird for you? I'll ask this before we get into talking about Battleground real quick, and then we're going to really break down from like a macro level SmackDown and Raw. But is that something that's weird for you as, for lack of a better term, a legitimate sports journalist? Like, you write about baseball, and you have for a while. You're a national baseball writer. Is it weird to have wrestling be covered not exactly the same way, obviously, but like with the same level of conviction? Is that weird for you? Because it's weird for me as someone who's more on the peripheral, not in the sense that like I don't follow wrestling or I haven't covered it, but I don't cover other sports. Like even the classical is more of like a long form site. You actually write you report on things and you also write longer things, but this was reported on in a way that felt like actively weird. How weird was it for you?
It wasn't. I think the weirdest moment was probably just people agreeing to my dumb idea to act like it was legitimate. Other than that, once that hurdle was cleared, it was like, okay, cool, we're gonna cover a draft.
Yeah, I guess once you get the ship, like once you get everything up, you already have like the mechanisms.
Yeah, no, it's not goofy because, I mean, yeah, baseball's like a more real sport or whatever, but they also wear pajamas on the field, so like it's not like baseball needs to be taken super seriously either.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we wanted to talk briefly, just do quick things we liked, things we didn't like from Battleground. I wanted to start with something I really liked, which was the beginning of the show, both in the sense that I'm happy who won the first match, and more importantly, I marked out in a way that I have not in a very, very long time for Bayley's music hitting. Like you posted in the follow-up to Battleground, I was that little girl that just freaks out. I love Bayley. Bayley in a way that touches me in an emotional, like I am emotionally connected with her in a way that I have never really been since I was a kid. I see a lot of hope in a very real way, in a tangible way with her and Sasha, that it carries on into my actual connection to her as a character. And to have her get that reaction, which everyone that's a fan of Bayley is deathly afraid of what happens when she goes to the main roster. This was the first time where I was like, I maybe don't have anything to worry about. How'd you feel about it? I'm sure you liked it, but like, did it touch you in the heartstrings the way it did with me?
Kate and I were at a bar to watch this at a local bar that shows the pay-per-views, and this is the first time we'd been there. So, met some cool people, and there were people like super excited for Bayley there, which was, that was awesome to be in a room full of people like exploding with joy for Bayley. And we also have Bayley like snap bracelets from when we went to a house show that she was at. So, immediately applied those once it was confirmed that it was not like Paige, no offense, Paige, who was Sasha's partner. So yeah, it was very exciting. I love Bayley. It's really been overdue for her coming up. I understand why they pushed it as far as they did. I also understand why she wasn't drafted because, people were getting even Finn Balor, who was picked third for Raw, and was the first NXT guy. He got a 10-second video, and then they moved on to the next pick. That was it. That was the only mention of him for the entire show. So that's pretty much that's what Bayley would have received, which is not really a fair introduction to the main roster. I think for the amount of time they've had her wait, even compared to Finn, because Bayley probably would have already been up if not for an injury that ended up having, Becky, Sasha, and Charlotte called up in the first place. So,
yeah, and that ended up being like a very serendipitous injury, for lack of a better term, in terms of serendipity.
Yeah.
Like that is, to me, what established her as someone the company could trust, because she did such a good job with carrying the division for the last year, basically. Not carrying, but being the standard bearer.
Yeah, and I mean, that work that she put in with those other women was really great for convincing people that like developmental works, and it wasn't just these 4 special women that made NXT work. Like as a touring brand, and as not as a touring brand with the rest of them, but sort of as a touring brand, and with the house shows and with TV. Bayley is really at the head of that movement. Alongside Finn, of the like, we're selling out shows that aren't attached to SummerSlam, that aren't attached to Mania, that are just happening wherever.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, why she didn't get called up. So, shorter version of all that is it was very exciting to see her get such a like personalized big moment instead of just like a little aside. I mean, Finn ended up having his big moment, which we'll get to, but this was really cool for Bayley to kind of get this little one-off as she moves toward the eventual promotion that's going to be a lot more permanent.
And I had the Sting fears. I tweeted about it. I had the Sting fears in my heart for the match. The fact that they just ended it clean with Sasha going over Charlotte I was very pleased. So what was your favorite part about the entire show outside of Bayley?
Man, that Kevin Owens Sami Zayn match was great.
Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was cathartic in a way that their matches have not been allowed to be, for good reason. Sammy was turned on by Owens, almost immediately when Owens showed up in WWE. So really, Sammy never got the full revenge on him. They never had that moment to really close things off, and this felt like it. When they said this was the last matchup for them, obviously it's not. They're going to wrestle against each other again at some point, and it could even be soon for one reason or another. But it feels like it'll be for something new, not for the same old problems.
Yeah, it will be, and like you said, an actual reason. They'll have them because this is maybe the best rivalry they have going outside of Sasha and Bayley, and that's a completely different dynamic. They need to stop getting in each other's way for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And just meet up because of something, and then they can start the feud again. But this was the match, it felt like, where it was like, we're gonna stop getting in each other's way for at least a couple of months, because I've proven definitively that on this night I am better than you, and I'm done talking about it. And I liked that they moved on, and we'll get to it when we talk about Raw and SmackDown a little bit. That they've moved, it feels like they have moved on, but they still have the ability to tease you with it. Like the idea that, Sammy might end up facing Kevin Owens in the main event of the night, just because who knows what could happen on Raw now, which, again, we'll get to. Raw was crazy. It was crazy.
Hey, we'll get to it.
Another one of my favorite things, other than the 2 things you mentioned, was I ended up really liking the main event. And not just because Dean won clean. It did a lot to establish that this is actually a new era. Like, we were all freaking out, like, oh man, they're gonna interfere in the match because they had every GM, all of the people, all of the authority figures down there, and then they ended up just having a match. Like, that, I think, was them saying, we're going to make legitimate moves to make this a situation where we're not just relying on the same storytelling tricks, for lack of a better term, to tell a story. We're actually going to, like we talked about offline, they're showing and telling at the same time, which is really hard for them to do. But I think they're starting to really, like, they're getting the like harmonies correct. Like, everything's resonating the way it should. And I was really impressed, if not by the match quality, what the match symbolized and how they ended it, especially. Like, he's just the champion now. Like, there's no, oh, well, he might, you know what I'm saying? Like, he lost. And it still allows you to have Seth and Roman as a thing, but it doesn't make it so that it's like, well, he won by hook or / crook, so we have to have another match between these guys. Like, they were like, nope, we're just going to move on. And if they get, again, the same thing with Owens and Sammy, if they get back together at the end, that's cool, but that's not what this story was. This specific episode of this story was about. So I really liked that. Did you have anything else you really liked from the show?
Well, continuing on that for a second, it's cool that they still kept open, like, the Seth Dean angle, you know, where Seth can say he wasn't pinned at some future point where they want to bring it up, and that he never had his true one-on-one rematch. So it's nice to just have that, like, in the deck for whenever you need it, even if it's a year from now.
Oh, definitely.
But it's also good for Dean, where he's not in a situation where, like, he escaped, because he beat Seth clean on Raw.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then he won the triple threat too. So Dean's a legitimate champion, who has already had a couple of successful title defenses and there's nothing screwy about them. So he's gone from someone people couldn't believe won Money in the Bank to couldn't believe that he cashed in and successfully won. And, you know, people were just assuming, oh, he only won because Roman got popped for the wellness policy. But, like, now Ambrose has the title and SmackDown has the title, and that's a big deal.
Yeah.
He's not just holding it just because.
Yeah, that's exactly, you articulated it much better than I did. That is exactly what I meant. That, like, he's a real champ. There's no, well, we can come back, like you said, Seth didn't get pinned by him, but he did lose clean to Seth, like, the last match before that, and the match before that was a draw. So, like, they've started to move the needle with Dean, and I think they're really just happy with the reaction Dean's gotten. Like, it's hard to argue with the reaction he's gotten. He's been a very good champion and a very over champion, which has been really hard for them. I'm excited more about that than, like, from all the things that came out of it, of Battleground. That was the thing for which I was most excited.
Yeah, they haven't had a really over champion since Seth, and that was, I mean, it was kayfabe hate, but
yeah,
it was hate. So another thing I loved, I'm not going to go into detail because this is, like, almost cheating to say, oh, I loved the things that Enzo said. But I did love, like, the deferral of John Cena, the deference John Cena showed, you know, to them. Like, this was their moment and he was happy to be there for the ride. But the thing I want to expand on that I actually liked the Becky Natalya match, and I think it got kind of short shrift because of it followed Zayn Owens. I like the psychology of it a lot, where Natalya is not a cheating heel. She's not that kind of heel. She's just kind of an asshole. Like, that's the kind of heel she's going to be. She's smart. She's capable. She came in with a plan. Becky was not ready for her to be so prepared, and that's why Becky lost. And Natalya was just a dick about it, like, before, during, after. Included, like, you know, went on Twitter and was still a jerk about it. So that, you know, that's great healing too. It's just a different kind of healing than, like, the obvious, oh, let's cheat, like what Charlotte does, where Charlotte's super talented but cheats, you know, just because she can. Like, why wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. So I appreciated that. And then, you know, when they faced off again on Tuesday, like, this really helped tie it together and made me appreciate it even more, is Becky understood that there was a plan, so she needed to be better prepared. and she was able to win that rematch.
Yeah, we'll get to how wonderful that entire segment was, but I watched it right before the show, and but like I said to you, that Natalya match on SmackDown was incredibly physical, and I didn't love the Natasha Becky match, but there were things I liked a lot less, and I agree with you that a lot of the whatever malaise I had watching it was largely a function of the fact that easily the match of the night happened right before it. So
yeah, match of the night, match of the year candidate happened before a very heavily submission based match.
Yeah.
So like a thoughtful, meticulous sounds wrong, but
methodical.
There we go. Yes. I mean, it's kind of like the card was so stacked in some ways, especially in retrospect, that you didn't really have many choices. They almost had 2 cooldowns after Owens and Zayn, but that's what happens when you have 9 matches on a card and they're all good.
Yeah, even Breezango and the Usos.
Oh man, that was really good.
Yeah, I wasn't being sarcastic. That was a legitimately good match. Tyler Breeze and Fandango I'm very excited for their future as a tag team. So I wanted to briefly talk about what I liked the least on the show, which was whatever in the heck that cluster kerfuffle was at the end of the Miz Darren Young match. It was just I got what they were going for, but I feel
the intent was great.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I just don't think it was a very poor job of execution, actively real bad. In a way that you don't often see. That it reminded me in those moments of TNA, where it's is everyone aware of what their marks are supposed to be? I did not like it at all, and I like Maurice a lot. We've talked about it, but and Mr. Brandon Stroud brought this up, and I thought it was an interesting point that they need to better establish whether or not The Miz is in on Maurice's stuff, because that'll make it less confusing, because if we understand that he's not always in on her tricks, that sometimes she's just okay, I'm going to do this so that I can pretend that this is happening and I'll have Miz go along. Miz will go along because we have a mental connection type of thing. They don't have to explain it, but they have to explain to me better, or reestablish they did the first time when she pretended her ankle was hurt and he was oh my god, you're the best wife ever. I want them to double it, reconfirm that's what's happening, so that you're kind of looking out for it, because it just happens all of a sudden and it looks bad, and then you're oh, and then in retrospect you're oh, she's just pretending so that she can get it to look like Bob Backlund attacked her, and you have to retrace all of the steps. And that's something that's bothered me with the last couple of times she's done the oh my god, I've been attacked, or oh my god, I fell. She's better than that, and the idea is cool. I just feel they have to establish it more contextually. Did you have anything that you wanted to add about the cluster kerfuffle?
I love that Darren Young realized that he's been trained to kill.
Oh, that was great.
It was such a good ending on paper. It just didn't translate, but that helped save it, where Darren Young's just looking at his hands and channeling his mentor, from 20 plus years ago, essentially realizing I can cause so much damage with these hands. Oh my god. So it's going to be fun to see Darren Young latch onto someone now that he's had this realization.
Also, he should learn how to do a crossface chicken wing instead of a GD Cobra Clutch. But that's a whole nother ball of yarn wax.
Okay.
So did you have anything you didn't like, or were you pretty much good with the entire show?
Yeah, it's all relative, whatever I didn't like. I mean, that was the real one thing that stood out. The only other thing is just more of a please be careful. Big E, dude, come on, please stop landing on your head.
Jeez Louise.
That's all. That's all. I mean, I know he's not trying to.
Oh, absolutely.
Just 30 seconds before that, I was talking to the person next to me about it. That, it's man, every time he does that, I feel he's knocking a few months off of his career.
Yeah.
And then, boom, lands on his head.
Yeah, please just be careful, Big E. You're a national treasure, and we need you. did you have anything else you wanted to add about the show, or did you want to move on to our big Raw and SmackDown?
Yeah, let's move on. I mean, I thought it was a really great show. The quality of these B shows is going up in a way where, it's great that it's not just a throwaway. It's such an easy opportunity. I feel like with SummerSlam happening and the draft just occurring, to not move the stories along in any way, just to really run in place but put on some cool matches. They didn't have any of those this was good but you'll forget about it in 3 days kind of thing.
Yeah, agreed.
It was a meaningful pay-per-view that had some things that I will want to go back and watch at some point. I'll be like, hey, remember this match? Remember this moment? This is a big deal. So that's pretty cool.
I'm going to, after we record, rewatch Bayley's entrance. I really love that. And I like the Wyatt family New Day match. I like the story they told within that. There was a lot of good in this pay-per-view. It's one of the better secondary pay-per-views. If you don't count Money in the Bank, which I don't, it's one of the better ones I've seen in the last couple of years. Money in the Bank's always on a different level. Because
I consider that unofficially one of the big four, where, for history purposes, they keep saying it's Survivor Series, but although maybe it will be now because it's supposed to be one of the dual brand pay-per-views. So maybe they'll
I think they'll
sexy it up and it'll be important again.
Yeah. I think they're going to do that, and I think they're probably going to do that with the Money in the Bank. I would assume the Money in the Bank has to be.
Probably.
Doesn't make sense for it to not be a dual brand. To go to Raw and SmackDown, Raw was really good. SmackDown was pretty good, but we've talked about and you've written about, it's interesting to see SmackDown trying to find its footing, and that's literally how it's being branded. Triple H talked about that in a tweet, that Raw is just being Raw basically, but the best possible version of Raw, and SmackDown is trying to redefine itself in a certain way. I was really interested in the meta stuff that happened on the show and with the show. The camera angles are awesome. They're just awesome.
Feels like a more dynamic shot show. And some of the angles they were opening up, the angles they were using for the Battle Royal on SmackDown were really cool, because you never see the whole first 5 minutes of the Battle Royal all the time is just this static shot essentially of a bunch of dudes just trying to maul each other.
Yeah, and then
so it was cool. It was cool moving around, slow panning, and you could see all the little things coming together, and then they'd zoom in individually on the little brawls that were happening.
Yeah, it was and there was just a lot of stuff. There's an awesome shot in Shoemaker's piece on the Ringer. He linked to it. It's the beginning of the Kevin Owens Fatal 4-Way, and they just did that big wide shot where they kind of pan from one corner to the opposite corner, but really far away from the performers in the ring.
Mm.
So you get this holistic sense of the arena in a way that you don't when you're just sitting there looking through the hard camera. It was the presentation differences are really stark, both between the shows and relative to what they used to be. Raw looks completely different.
Yeah.
I love that they moved the announcers to not by the ring side anymore. I really like that, especially have it on one show, not the other, which is what it looked like was going on.
Yeah, Raw has a very, not quality of show-wise, but Raw has a very WCW thing going on.
Yes.
They're introducing this cruiserweight division. They've moved this announce booth. There were other things, but I forget. Local talent is a thing again, but that's also old Raw too.
And which I told you how much I loved Byron Saxton's interview with that poor boy that was murdered by Braun Strowman.
He knew every word he was speaking was a lie, and that Braun Strowman was going to end him.
That was a really special moment for, and I said this to you immediately after I could actually articulate it. It reminded me of when you see the thought bubbles, or not even the thought bubbles, but those inner monologues from comics. Like, I felt like I was getting, in this quick interview, a very, like, a look at the interior life of that character. And it was because you're asking, why are you doing this? And he's explaining to you, like, I have to do, this is my job, and I have to believe on an intellectual level, even if I don't like, I can intellectualize the ability for me to win. If I don't believe it in my gut, or maybe the opposite, if I do believe in my gut, then it becomes a possibility. Like, it was a really interesting glimpse, and it was similar to me to, like, what Renee did with Becky right after. I really like them getting them in the moments that you get when you, like, do sideline reporting and stuff like that. You're not going to always get people at the exact right time, but it's really cool to get them interviewed during the midst of the competition, or not even during the midst of the competition, but much more adjacent to it than, like, oh, we're backstage for no reason whatsoever other than there's an interview segment.
I think it's great. All the things they're doing with the promos and the new vignettes, it makes a lot of sense. You should limit the in-ring promos as much as you can, except for to, like, the people who can do something with it,
like Enzo.
Yeah, but, like, having Bray Wyatt give a promo on SmackDown that was taped, perfect, great. There were no what chance to deal with. He can just go at his more natural cadence, which is great, instead of that, like, he has to take a breath every few words because they're going to what him, even if he's, like, spewing brilliance. It'd be good for the guys who are less talented talkers. You get that in the moment feel, like you said, for Becky. Roman also had a moment like that where,
oh man, that was so good.
It was great because he was basically like, you earned this and I respect you, but I'm going to kick your ass after you win that belt.
That endeared me so. I've always liked Roman. I don't have a problem with Roman, but that moment was like, that's who I'm willing to root for. A guy that's like, no, that dude kicked my ass, but I'm gonna kick his ass next time I see him, and I hope he beats the shit out of Seth Rollins. Like, I loved him saying, I respect that man. Like, it was this genuine moment of humility that I understand had a lot more going on to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, you captured like I said, you capture moments with these people that you wouldn't get otherwise, because whether or not it's scripted or predetermined, they are competing with the crowd, with themselves, with the person across the ring from them. They want to put on the best possible show, so you are getting these real emotional moments that you wouldn't be getting otherwise. Because, like I said, it's not just like, oh, well, we're standing here with blank. Like, that just doesn't, and I've been saying this for years, they needed to mix up how they interact with the talent. If you want to create an actual storyline and not just a series of vignettes that are connected, you have to give the people in the stories real characteristics and real characters that are grounded in something. And that's, to me, the difference, is that for years they've hinted at, oh, well, this is a fake sports league. But they also treat it as though the WWE is unto itself this, like, completely separate entity. And over the last 6 months to a year, maybe a year and a half, they've really pulled back no, we're one of many wrestling companies. We're the wrestling company. We're the most important. But there's stuff going on outside of our window that has real value, and we don't want to necessarily show you it, but we want to create the feeling that the people that are here aren't just here because we have them on contract. They're coming here because this is the best fake sports league in the world. And I don't know if you saw the Draft Center Live, but that, to me, even more so than the Cruiserweight Classic preview for the bracketology, was what they should be doing all of the time. That was a real sports show. And the way we talked earlier in the podcast about how people are actually reporting on and treating the draft like it's a real draft. They treated it like it was a real draft. They had actual analysis about what it means going forward. And yeah, it's couched in kayfabe, but they're talking about real things.
And they did. It seemed like they let people just kind of have live mics.
Yes.
Like maybe there were some worksheets and maybe some people had like a direction, but all of the rumors said, for instance, that Cesaro was a total shoot.
Yes.
Which is fascinating. It was even more fascinating when it was like the follow-up rumor was Vince actually loved that because he loves when guys stick up for themselves.
Yes. I think that's going to be known as, like, I think Draft Day is going to be known in the way that the Big Block of Cheese Day is for West Wing fans. It's going to be known as Brass Ring Day. Like, that's the day that you reach for the brass ring and you say, like, Dolph Ziggler, I don't know if you saw Dolph Ziggler's promo towards the end of that was a great promo for a guy that's been pushed down and isn't where he thinks he should be. It made me instantly, and I do not like Dolph Ziggler.
It's very hard for you to like him, yeah.
I was really, I mean, I root for him as a human being. I think he seems like a really great guy. It's not one of those situations where I'm like, no, he's also a piece of shit. I just, that was the first time for me in a long time, basically since the Survivor Series where he won the entire thing he got rid of the Authority. That was the most I've ever believed in him, that he deserved to be where he was. I thought it was a really great, and it was live. That was him just saying, we need to talk. Did you see Kevin Owens? That dude shot. That dude was like
about not being drafted where he should have been drafted.
He was like, I loved how he's like, I totally get why John Cena and all of these other guys are ahead. Like, I'm not stupid, I get it, but like blank and blank and blank, and he's calling out actual people. You're like, oh wow, you really feel this way. You are really legitimately angry, even though you probably knew it was coming, that these people were drafted ahead of you. Like, it felt like a real thing. It felt like, and I think it does a good job of establishing real, genuine stakes for the performers, because it's that moment where the kayfabe of the situation is calling towards a real thing. This draft to me, and I was explaining it to my fiance, that like, no, they really don't know where they're going. These are real emotions they're having when they get drafted to another show and their husband or something, or their boyfriend isn't on it, or their girlfriend isn't on it. Like, you can tell when I think it's John, I can never remember, but Naomi's husband, the sense of relief he had when his wife was drafted was real. You could tell it was real. And I just loved it. That Draft Center special, it's 3 hours. I watched it 1.5 times.
I felt like they did a good job. I just don't want to lose this thread of relationships. They did a good job of keeping people together if they're on like the off, if they're not on a wrestling show, like Total Divas. They kept together like Total Divas couples. Mm-hmm. So like Renee is exclusive to SmackDown now. She's with Dean Ambrose, who is on SmackDown. The Usos are together on the same brand. It allows them to like keep this together in a broader sense, which made me realize when Nikki Bella comes back, she's probably going to be on SmackDown,
which
is great,
genuinely great.
Yes.
God, I miss Nikki Bella so much.
Queen of Strong Style, love her so much. But yeah, like Cena's there, and they're going to have Total Bellas, and Daniel Bryan's the GM, so like, how the shit could they not have Nikki Bella on SmackDown?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it would actively be dumb and hard for them to not have her on the show.
Unless they were just exploiting that for how much Nikki misses John for like half the season, but that doesn't seem to make much sense.
And yeah, I just all the way around, the presentation for me, and I mean, we spent 15 minutes talking about it. The presentation for me has really been incredible. We've always known they have an incredible video staff. They have an incredible production team, just in general. They have probably one of the best in sports, if not the best in sports. But to see them actually, like, get to do their jobs the way you can kind of tell they've always wanted to, because there's just so many ideas coming out, and a lot of it's subtle. but you can tell they've been sitting on. They haven't been like holding back in the sense that they're not trying to give you the best possible show, but the constraints are off. They were constrained to, you can only do these things, you can only have these shots. And you really get the feeling they said, listen, we're actually going to try to change things. So any idea, and there's no such thing as a stupid idea until we tell you it's a stupid idea. I really, the dynamic has completely changed. And it's fun to watch, again, from like a meta perspective of like, I'm actually interested now in watching SmackDown as a thing I have to watch, and I'm interested when I watch Raw and what SmackDown's going to do, which I just never thought was going to happen.
Yeah, and we briefly touched on this earlier, but they're in very different parts of their
evolution.
Yeah. And I wrote about this before the episodes even aired. Just based on like what they did with the draft rosters, which was Raw is for the established stars. Like
now.
Yeah, that is where the wrestlers who are both the present and the future are there. And like, yeah, you can say Finn Balor's getting a huge push, but Finn Balor is one of the biggest stars in the company. He's an international wrestling star who helped spearhead their very successful touring brand for developmental. People have been dying for him to come up for months and months and months. And he immediately is thrust into the main event scene when he gets up, and no one is even upset about it except Vince Russo, but fuck him.
Yeah, fuck him, stupid.
But...
And I don't like Finn, but that...
And I mean, you can't deny, like, that is... Like, even if you're not rooting for him in the same way with Ziggler, it's like, that's a guy who still belongs, like... Not that they're the same, but, like, yeah, they belong in a certain spot. And they're doing it. And, like, maybe you'll root for other people against him, but, like, that's his place. So... Raw is very much like that, where Owens and Zayn came up from their successful NXT careers, immediate stars. Enzo and Cass, immediate stars.
Mega stars. Absolute supernovas.
Sasha, Charlotte, they're stars. They have all of them there now, and there's not so much in the way of mistreated talent on Raw. There's really not. Like, you could say Cesaro is, but you could also very easily argue that Cesaro is always in the main event scene or always chasing a title and always gets tons of screen time. Like, maybe he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do, but he's established. He has he has a fan base. That's what Raw is. Cesaro asked why he's on Raw. That's why he's on Raw. You look at SmackDown's roster. Yes, you have established guys like Ambrose, but really carrying a brand in the way that he probably could have previously, but wasn't allowed to. You've got Cena and Styles, who aren't new, but they're very reinvented from even a few years ago in their careers. And they're still huge names, because SmackDown has to tour on its own and support itself. It's all WWE's money, but this experiment fails if no one goes to see SmackDown or no one watches it. And then otherwise, down the card, you've got guys who have been mistreated, like Ziggler, who already has a huge opportunity, like Apollo Crews, who was immediately thrust into the main roster as a huge surprise to everyone, had nothing going on for him, and everyone lost interest before they even had any. He immediately got a shot, on the first SmackDown.
Baron Corbin.
Yeah, you got Baron Corbin, who was made like, hey, here's a thing you should care about. We're not going to use him every week, and he's just going to fight Ziggler all the time. You've got Bray Wyatt, who he didn't get the first crack at Dean Ambrose's belt, but if you had to name the one guy in the roster who's going to take it from Dean, you'd pick Bray, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
So he's finally going to get a title. He'll finally really be cemented as a main event guy. He'll, get a chance that maybe he hasn't had on Raw for a while. That's the kind of, Tyler Breeze is there. Fandango's there. Tyler Breeze is a guy who, maybe that's not a future WWE champion, or they don't see him as that kind of guy. But like, he could, be a serious force in the tag division with Fandango. He could be, upper mid card. He could be a guy you throw into the main event scene when you need to. All these guys will get these chances on SmackDown. And then who knows, maybe in a year when they do the draft again, the ones who have really, really worked out might get pushed over to Raw. And then they'll bring up the next wave of guys from NXT who they feel like are too good for NXT, but are not quite ready to immediately become stars on Raw. So you've created this like halfway point where it's still kind of part of a feeder system. And it doesn't diminish from SmackDown at all because, do you complain about the quality of NXT or it being the C show? Because it is the C show. But that's fine. Their C show is great. And now they're trying to make it so that the B show is great. And it serves a purpose in this larger whole.
And I think there's little stuff like having American Alpha and Dean Ambrose and a couple of other... They have these... Like, Dean Ambrose might be the biggest star in the company that isn't like isn't a transcendent cultural figure.
Yeah. Crossover star.
Yeah. But I think John Cena goes past that. Like, Randy Orton, to me, kind of has crossover appeal. He's the type of person you stop when you're going through and you're like, oh, I stop and go, wow, he's super good looking, and I'll keep watching. But John Cena's is a cultural touchstone now. So obviously he's not as big a star as him, but outside of John Cena, really, he is probably one of the two biggest stars in the company. And they have American Alpha, who's probably the most talented tag team. And they're going to have, I feel like, bits and pieces of guys where it's like they have a couple of great guys that are going to be mainstays on SmackDown that aren't going to do the transition to Raw thing. And that, in and of itself, beyond their big names, will allow the rivalry to continue.
Yes.
Because in the the Red Sox have a really good team, even though they can't, or they couldn't at the time, compete with the amount of money that the Yankees were spending, which is an intentional thing. They're trying to be the underdog show. I thought they did a good job of establishing themselves as the underdog show without being too on point with it, or just shoving it in your face from a roster perspective. The consensus is Raw is stacked and SmackDown's still really good. So you just have the odds against you. It's not just like you said, no one's complaining about the quality of NXT, and no one should complain about the quality of SmackDown. I mean, they're going to have bumps and bruises the first couple of weeks because they're establishing a new show in a way that, SmackDown was taped. That's a completely different world. They had to change on the fly, basically. They had, a couple of weeks to be like, oh, well, you're going to be live now, so you have, a month to figure it out. Have fun.
And I mean, they've got an announce team that's never worked together. That was all over each other and did not work well in that episode. But I mean, you could see the promise there. And Mauro Ranallo is the perfect guy to rein JBL in. Yes. They'll all get better at picking their spots and not talking over each other. But even that's part of this learning process, so I don't mind grading them on a curve for a little bit. It was especially because it was still an entertaining show.
Yes.
But that's pretty much where we are. And they've already announced a few changes, like Rhino's coming back, Shelton Benjamin's coming back.
Shelton Benjamin. All
these guys where I was just talking about Breeze and Bray and Ziggler and Corbin and Cruz. They're gonna wrestle guys like Rhino, like Shelton Benjamin. Those guys aren't there to win or take titles or do anything. They're there for the same reason that Rude and Aries and Eric Young or whoever are in NXT. They're here to it's established people, help them along and help sell tickets.
Yes.
And
yeah. What do they?
That's great. It's great.
Not jobbers to the stars. That's the word. That's the word I was looking for. Which is a real job. It's a good job.
Oh yeah.
Mechanic. That's just what they call it. That's what I call mechanics. Is jobbers to the stars.
I do hate to plant the seed in your head, but I feel like American Alpha is on SmackDown, so that when they eventually split, they can then work on making both of them into individual stars.
Yes.
So that's because you can't. If you split them on Raw, they're not at that point where you could split them right away. But if you split them quick on SmackDown, whatever your definition.
Don't do this to me, Mark.
I'm just saying you could, because Jason Jordan. Chad Gable will be a huge star, but Jason Jordan could be the star.
Agree. Yeah, he was my top prospect 2 weeks ago, and I continue to believe that. Though Enzo's coming up quick.
Oh man, as the better he gets in the ring and the understanding of what he is, which is a very important piece of the puzzle.
He is a brilliant ring psychologist.
Yes.
He's one of the best natural ring psychologists that I can think of. He gets it on a fundamental in his bones level. He gets I do this now. He's clearly a guy that's just watched wrestling without intellectualizing it too much, but actually just becoming fluent in the psychology of wrestling. And he has, if he can get his in-ring to even be 75%, and it looks like he can get there in a way that I did not see happening, he could be a real big star.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy you let win the Cruiserweight title at some point when they're not a tag team, just so he has some other bona fide besides I was Big Cass's partner.
Yeah, and he's a legit, he is turning into a legit performer outside of Big Cass. And Big Cass was in my top 5 too. That team really, I mean, like you said, John Cena just celebrating the moment with them was really cool. And I think that's part of one of the things I like a lot right now is that there's a genuine joy for the performers right now. It feels like they're happy that things seem to be going well and moving in a positive direction. Like Randy Orton as bright and chipper and fun Randy Orton. I have a soft spot for Randy Orton, as do you.
Oh yeah.
And I like this Randy Orton. Renee did a unfiltered interview with him, and he's a funny, engaging person. And although I thought the pitcher catcher joke was really off color, mostly because there's a bunch of better jokes you could make, I really like that the part where he ran around the ring. The crowd wants to root for him or root against him. That RKO, the second one he did against Miz, where he RKO'd him once, and then he just stood in the ring for 2.5 minutes, and sat down and waited, and the crowd wasn't even upset about it. At first I was okay, Randy's milking it, and then I started to be oh, what's he gonna do? When's he gonna do it? Which kind of Randy are we gonna get? What's happening? Is he actually hearing the voices? And then you realize I did get sucked in by Orton. He's been gone for so long, and he really does know what he's doing. When he's motivated, he is one of the best performers in that entire company. And that's not to say he's lazy or anything, but I mean, it's the thing that's plagued him versus Cena so many times. It's been done a million times, and there's the energy's not there between the two of them. So those moments where, I mean, his Legend Killer thing is, well, it's legendary. I loved his feuds with Christian. I love his feud with Daniel Bryan. I love the feud with Seth Rollins. It's a shame it got cut short. But all those moments are just the best Randy Orton moments. And it seems like getting, stuck in a feud with Lesnar has really helped reignite that. It even carries over during the time where he's talking to Miz. No offense to Miz, just, Oh yeah, and yeah, just knowing that he has that club in his bag is always fun to see, because you totally just if you didn't get it before, you get it in those moments. And John Cena, just like I said, seems to be not happy to be there, but they feel all of their, especially a guy like John Cena, all of my hard work over the last 15 years or 13 years is finally becoming a thing where I can look and say, I didn't help build this. I built this. This is the WWE I have been working towards, because John Cena's been very vocal about this. He wants it to be taken seriously. And it's being taken seriously. And you can really palpably feel that amongst the performers. They understand that they're not going to be, this sounds weird, but they're not going to be stuck in the WWE forever. There's places they can go if they're unhappy, so they become less unhappy because they're not stuck there for the rest of their lives. You look at a guy like Cody Rhodes, he can go places, and you can also do acting. There are ways to branch out. If you get on ESPN, that's a huge thing. They covered on ESPN now, and there's this real, just an overall, it's wrestling with I don't want to say with a smile on its face, but they look like they're having fun out there, and that's half the battle. That's what I love about Lucha. about Lucha Underground is they genuinely seem to be happy to be performing for people in the temple.
Yeah, it's all noticeable, and I mean that's even part of what helped SmackDown. Like it had it had some rough moments, and it's gonna have some growing pains, but there was this energy, kind of just this undercurrent of it, and you could feel it, and you could feel that things were a little different. And if you give it time and kind of let all that collect, I think we're gonna have 2 special shows that we get to watch every week.
So I think I want to ask this every week, but we'll see. Raw or SmackDown, which one did you prefer?
Oh, I like Raw better.
Okay. Me too. I mean, obviously, and it's unfair. We're grading on a curve, so let's say, like you did. Let's say if Raw was an A, which I think it was a great episode of Raw, like a capital G, just great episode of Raw. I thought SmackDown, and I love SmackDown, so it was actually lower than it had been previous weeks. But what they're trying to do is just so much different that it's not fair to compare them to old SmackDown. You have to compare them to what they're trying to do now, and I just thought it was I'm not gonna be nice and say it's like they're just a half a step. They're like a step and a half behind, but you can see that their form is getting better, and they will eventually catch up to Raw. And there's a pretty good chance that they're going to surpass them because the degree of difficulty long term for a 2-hour show with that level of talent in the company, period. They should be fine. I don't see why it won't get better next week and the week after and the week after and the week after and the week after.
Yeah, and like the women's division isn't getting the women's division was featured very briefly, but they don't have a title yet. I assume at some point a title will show up, whether it's like a mid-card title. The ability for the belts to switch between shows is going to be huge because if you make a mid-card women's title, you can you can have Becky Lynch win it, for example, on SmackDown, but then have her win the women's championship at some point while she still has that to give that extra boost, like like Seth Rollins winning the US and the World Championship the WWE Championship did for the US title. It just gives it that extra level of like, oh, the biggest champion in the company also cares about this belt. That's huge. So that'll help legitimize it. You can do a lot of things like that, and the rosters aren't set, as we talked about. If Nikki Bella shows up on SmackDown, let's say Bayley shows up on SmackDown, because you need another, huge star, another face, because the heels really seem to be lining up against Becky. Then you've got a completely different show too. They've really got the skeleton here, and it's constructed very well, and they're gonna, all of it's gonna start to fill out soon, and it's a little harder to show all your cards at once with the 2-hour show as well, I think.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You just don't have that extra hour of breathing room, so you're like doubling up on the stuff you have to really like fit in.
So it's entirely possible next week has much more devoted to the women and what the future of the women's division is. Just as an example, because you're not doing 2 giant matches that take up like a third of the show by themselves.
Exactly. And I mean, this is something I did an interview once with Shoemaker, and we talked about this for like 10 minutes about the idea of being able to root for something in WWE. No one roots for WWE, right? That was essentially Shoemaker's argument. And what
is this Shoemaker talking about WWE is the heel?
Yes. Yeah. We talked about like no one is in the way that they were during the Monday Night Wars when they were like, I'm a WWF guy or a WCW guy. They don't have that. What they're doing here is giving you that without eating their own lunch because it's on 2 different nights. They have, for lack of a better term, a complete stranglehold over USA in terms of the content that they can produce. They can kind of do whatever they want. Once SmackDown starts getting an overrun instead of like a hard cutoff at 10, that's when I really think you'll start to see like them really be accepted as an equal brand, because they just cut it off right at 10 when I was watching. But yeah, I find in general the idea of being able to root for one of the 2 shows to be the most exciting thing. I plan on rooting for SmackDown, to be honest. Like I can see myself, that's the direction I'm going to go. But I can be I could be persuaded by Raw at this point, and that's an interesting dynamic to have as a wrestling fan. Because like I said to you, like I'm genuinely interested in what's going to happen on Tuesday after Monday's over. And I'm wondering, they started with small potatoes, to be honest. No offense, Rhino, but like signing Rhino was like a cool... No, there's still free agents out there in the wrestling world that we could pick up. You could have a situation where like, I don't know, CM Punk comes back and it's on Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? Like, not him necessarily, but someone at his level, a big, huge name gets signed randomly and they debut him on SmackDown, and then SmackDown becomes this like, oh my god, you have to see, anybody could get signed, anybody could get picked up. You might get somebody from NXT you weren't expecting.
You could play it up with something like, say Ricochet gets signed.
Yes.
He goes to SmackDown because he says in his negotiations with Raw, they wanted to put him in the Cruiserweight division. And SmackDown promised him immediate opportunities because it's the opportunity show, to go into the main event. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, SmackDown got Ricochet. That changes everything.
And they can fake trades. They can fake push for trades. Like, Cesaro could be like, I'm not going to perform on the show. I want you to trade me to SmackDown. And then you have player movement and stuff like that. I hate to use this word again, but holistically, they're creating this fake sports feel to a scripted sports feel to it. And it's really awesome to watch them figure out all of the little components of that for world building. They're finally saying, and I think we can end on this in terms of talking about the big picture. They're literally coming up with a universal title. Like,
yes,
the name is kind of cheesy, but when you think about it in the context of the WWE universe, it's saying something specific. It's saying we're creating a world completely. We are officially going all in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of way. We are creating a WWE universe where it is you have everything and stuff can permeate through that like shield, but we're creating a universe for you to live in and not have to go outside. And wrestling fans don't like going outside. I really, and the Universal title, I don't love the name, but it's how did you feel about that?
I think, yes, the name sounds goofy, like rolling off the tongue. But when you think about it, you've got the angle you just presented. But the name also makes it so that there's a legitimate argument to be had about who is the real WWE champion. Because you've got on the one side, you go, I'm the WWE champion. That is literally the name. And then you've got the other side going, yeah, but this is the Universal Champion, which encompasses the entire WWE universe, which implies it is the most important.
It's not quite as big as a Galactic Champion.
It is bigger. I'm sending you science books. But I like that kind of that interplay there where it's just immediate. Well, which one's better?
Especially if Seth and Dean have it. You can have them feud without having them touch each other for a year.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Like it does sound funny to say the Universal title, but wait until fans start arguing about it, or people in the show start arguing about which one is more important, and they're going, they're backing up their guy. Oh, it's gonna be great. It's really gonna work. It's got this level of weight to it that I feel like the world title never had in WWE.
Yeah, you mean the big gold belt?
Yeah. So, bringing that back would have reminded people of the disrespect that belt had at the hands of WWE, even at the hands of WCW. Starting completely fresh with something that is essentially showing up and being like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm the most important here. I am on the flagship show, the superior show, and it does say Universal here. So that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I think we covered everything we wanted to cover. Did you want to add anything else before we start saying our goodbyes?
Yeah, just one more thing on the world building. If you watch various WWE documentaries or the DVDs or anything that's like about the Monday Night Wars, they're always talking about how inspired they were and how driven they were to do something that was better than WCW, and not even just out of a sense of survival, but just that creative push.
Yes.
And since there is no WCW, creating a situation like this where you really are two different shows with two different people maybe being the main voice behind the scenes, it's really going to drive people to be like, no, like you said with Cena helped lead this company during a really dark time where everyone he was wrestling looked exactly the same, and it helped, the rise of the indies, which they have since purged to create this most fascinating version of WWE. So like now it's not like he's going to stop being motivated. Now he gets to really take this final challenge of like, I'm going to make SmackDown into the show.
Yeah. And I want to add to that real quick. If you don't like John Cena after watching his interview on the Draft Center about how he's going to make SmackDown the best show possible and how he's going to make it the flagship show, you should just stop watching wrestling. That dude is so dedicated to being great and to putting on a great show that, like, to treat him in any other way is, to me, almost borderline offensive. He gives so much to the business that for me, and I felt like he took it as a genuine, like, honor to be put on SmackDown, and I thought that was just so uplifting for the entire brand and just for wrestling fans in general to have a guy that gives that much of a shit after being a 15-time champion, a movie star, like a legitimate comic movie star, and the host of the Today Show, to go to the Today Show and then go to work that night and just putting on performance after performance of the night, like just busting your ass. That dude, he's just great. He's a genuinely great all-time performer, and like you said, you're really gonna see it over the next couple of months and maybe the next year or two. And I couldn't be more excited. This really feels like something great's starting, right?
Yeah. I think they've taken a lot of what they've learned from NXT and its success and the competition that it created in-house, and now they're going to do it on a much larger stage that's going to make them much more money. Yes. And I am very excited for the first joint pay-per-view where both sides are really feeling the competitive nature of it. And it's just like, here's a SmackDown match. Oh my God, that was amazing. Here's a Raw match. Oh my God, that was amazing. And they're just trying to outdo each other the whole time because they work for the same company, but they work for different brands.
Yeah, it's going to be like an all-star game, like an MLB all-star game every single time. Like, it's going to... I am so hyped. Yeah, I think we got everything. This was fun. I'm super excited about the future. Speaking of which, we will, for obvious reasons, start having Thursday be the day we publish. We'll record on Wednesdays. That shouldn't change unless something crazy happens and they add like another show. So I think we're gonna.
I love WWE, but please don't add another show.
Please. 8 hours was enough. But yeah, and we're gonna go through some format changes. Not anything crazy, but I know you wanted to speak a little bit more to that in terms of what we're gonna probably be spending more time doing in the future.
Well, we were thinking about the format that we had, which was essentially, we do a lot of previews of like a special. If we had recorded last week, if Nick hadn't been on vacation, we would have gone match by match for Battleground, and then we would have started this episode by going match by match for Battleground. WWE is going to do pay-per-views for SmackDown and for Raw, which means we're going to have pay-per-views pretty much every other week, essentially, plus 2 shows that we're bothering to cover. It's going to be the same episode every single time if we did what we were doing. So this will be much more like talking about our favorite stuff, our least favorite stuff, the things we're most excited for, the things we really need to kind of still be sold on, and highlights from Raw and SmackDown, and probably also which show we're enjoying more, what they're doing better, how they're working for their intended purposes. We'll still talk about Lucha Underground when that's back. That season's over now, so we have to wait until 2017 for the next one. Obviously, talk about NXT. I know. It's deserved. It's a deserved sigh. We also didn't talk about that because since Nick was on vacation, he didn't see Ultima Lucha Part Dos, Part Trace. I don't really know the pair I'm supposed to announce this. So we'll probably catch up on that at some point next week when we don't have as much draft to talk about.
Definitely, yeah.
But this will be more conversationally based going forward instead of we'll let the rigidity slip out of the podcast.
Instead of me reading the match card from Wikipedia, going through each one. And speaking of Lucha, I wanted to just a quick what we watched and what we're gonna watch. I watched a shit ton of WWE the last few days. But what I'm going to be watching is the first day I've really had a chance to sit down. I'll probably watch it tonight, much to my beautiful, wonderful fiance's chagrin. I will be watching the end of Lucha, Ultima Lucha Dos Part Trace. I'm very excited. I've heard nothing but good things. I would have watched it when I was on vacation, but I want to get married in 2 months, so I didn't. You've seen it, so I'm guessing I have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I debated having no reaction whatsoever to not do anything, but yeah, no, it was great. I will say, on the whole, I don't think this Ultima Lucha was as great as the previous one. But that just means it was really great instead of holy shit, this is fucking amazing. But it was great. I'm not gonna look down at a really great conclusion to the season. You will love it. There are some twists and turns that you maybe were not expecting.
Oh, you know how I love twists and turns.
Which do you prefer, the twists or the turns?
The turns. I prefer the turns. I'm not that flexible, so twists make me uncomfortable. So what did you watch? Did you just watch as much WWE as me, and are now like? Oh,
I watched so much WWE. Get ready for this to be the future, as we were just discussing the necessity for a format change. Yeah, that's pretty much what I watched. American Rana is this weekend in Providence, Rhode Island. Beyond Wrestling is returning to FET. I am not going for the first time in a few years, but I suggest that if you are listening to this and you live anywhere in New England and you want something to do on Sunday that is awesome, you should go watch that. I will have to wait until they post the footage to Be On Demand, their subscription service on YouTube. So I'm still giving them money. I'm still supporting indie wrestling. Don't hassle me.
Did you have anything else you want to add before we go through the old rigmarole?
No. That's it.
As always, you can catch me on Twitter, though I will say I am going to be very political for the next 4 months, so if you're not into that, you might not want to follow me at the Nixter, TheN1CKSTER, but if you are, welcome. Mark, where can they find you?
Mark_Normandin on Twitter. That's Mark with a C. You can get my wrestling writing at sbnation.com/wrestling. There's been a little more of it lately with the draft and all these live events, and there's going to be more. And you can get my baseball writing at sbnation.com/MLB if you're also into that sort of thing, which I don't know, you probably are because everything is wrestling.
As always, you can rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Did you have a 5-star review, or just everything is awesome when you're part of a team? Or everything is awesome. Let's have that be the 5-star review on iTunes. And you can check us out at soundcloud.com/Rudo Radio. I think that's it. Would you like to say goodbye, Mark?
No.
Okay, well, I will. Bye!